The Subaru Outback is an oddball wagon slash SUV with a remarkable amount of broad appeal. Today I'm going to go over all of the changes for the new 2023 model, and I'm also going to highlight all of the reasons that this is a standout in the segment. If you enjoy fun, detailed car content without the fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell. New for 2023, the Outback got a little cosmetic surgery done to the front end in all trims except for the Wilderness, which is basically unchanged. Probably because Subaru just spent all of that money giving it that really cartoony look that I like. The next change is an improved eyesight system with a wider field of vision. It also receives a new collision avoidance system, which basically below 50 miles per hour, it can actually swerve to avoid whatever impending accident is about to occur, or at least try to. But in order to avoid causing another collision, you have to have blind spot monitoring models in order to get that feature. Additionally, the Touring trim will actually get a third sensor, which is supposed to help better with detecting pedestrians at a intersection. The Touring also gains a camera and screen that can sub in as the rear view mirror. The next change, the Onyx Edition will now offer the 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. It's no longer just the turbo. And while those are all noteworthy, the biggest detail for me is that the new car will have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for the 11.6-inch touchscreen. And the last change, Subaru is finally getting with the times and adding USB-A and USB-C ports in the front and rear on premium trim up. None of these changes are groundbreaking, which is why I'm not, wasting a 10-minute video on that topic. And if you want a full review of the Outback, I already made one and will link that in the description. Before we continue, I'd like to thank Royal on the Eastside in Bloomington, Indiana for letting me use this Outback and various others in the past. If you're looking for a new Subaru and don't want to pay over MSRP, check them out. So the biggest reason why I appreciate the Outback is it's a unicorn. That might sound bold, considering in certain regions, these are more common than dudes that wear the same shoes since high school. But this really has no similar competitors. You could argue the Mazda CX-50, but I've driven the Mazda CX-50. It's nothing like this. That's its own car and it has its own distinct pros, but what I like so much about this is that if you're comparing it to a Subaru Forester or Mazda CX-5, Toyota Rav4, most of the other small SUVs, this is more premium while still offering the same or better amount of space in the back. And it only carries, a roughly $2,000 premium over those small SUVs. In some cases, if you consider the features, it's equivalent. And another part of that unicornness from the wagon proportions is a more car-like driving position without sacrificing ground clearance or visibility. And it's also not quite the SUV that a Jeep Grand Cherokee is, or a Honda Passport. It's not that bloated or expensive. So I tend to group this in more so with the other small SUVs. I think this thing has a strong identity. It plays into the outdoorsy vibes without going over the top unless you get the Wilderness. But instead of being all superficial, the Wilderness is really about it. And that's the second highlight I want to point out. The Wilderness trim is as badass as a Subaru Outback can be. You'll have the turbocharged engine standard, you'll have an actually improved final drive ratio, increases ground clearance from 8.7 inches to 9.5 inches. You'll have skid plates underneath, beefier roof rails that can support 700 pounds of static load, so a rooftop tent. Whereas these are actually, they're cool in their own right because they have swing out crossbars, but they can't support that much weight. It's details like that. Subaru built the Wilderness to actually be used as intended. Whereas, things like the Rav4 TRD off-road look cool and have a nice all-wheel drive system, but the actual usability wasn't drastically improved. And I also like the Onyx Edition too, because it still offers practical things like StarTech seating that's water repellent and more durable, a full-size spare, and a front camera system, so you can see if you're about to completely demolish your front bumper here. Oh wait, I forgot, you don't need to worry about that because it has cladding. Anyway, that leads me to my next big pro for here, and this is an obvious one. Not only is all-wheel drive standard, full-time all-wheel drive is standard. It's a very capable system. It uses equal length drive shafts. That's why it's called symmetrical. So the idea is that it's more balanced. There's not going to be as much torque steer. Plus it can actually send more than 50% of the power to the rear if it needs to. Most Outbacks will have X mode, which basically uses the brakes to try to divert power left to right, something that other systems once again struggle with. Plus you have standard 8.7 inches of ground clearance in all Outbacks. Yeah, the approach and departure angles aren't great, but for inclement weather, camping, and mild trail use, these are pretty usable and popular in the mountains for that reason. And unless you get the wilderness, you're getting all these capabilities in a car that's subtle. My next reason, this thing is borderline luxurious, and in many cases, I think it's more comfortable than a lot of the offerings from premium brands. The seats are great. They're not bolstered too heavily, but they still grip you. If you go with the limited or touring, you'll have an extended thigh support. This is one of the most comfortable vehicles for me. I'm 6'3". You also have nice padding where your knees rest. The elbow rests are really plush too. And when you're out on the road, this has a sound insulating windshield. It's aerodynamic, and there's a lot of insulation, more so than what you get with the Forester, making this a very quiet car for the money. Plus, the suspension is soft, yet it has a pretty low center of gravity due to, well, one, its lower roofline, and its horizontally opposed engine under the hood. So despite the posh ride, there's really not an abundance of body roll. So I think I can make a pretty solid argument that this is the most comfortable vehicle under 40, maybe even 45 grand. Now for a more controversial reason, the engines. Subaru nailed the options for power plants in the Outback, not the transmission. The CVT, especially in the turbocharged engine, hold this thing back. But you'll have a 2.5 liter or a 2.4 liter turbocharged engine that will firmly place you into the seat back if you're accelerating from a roll. The transmission definitely limits it off the line, but despite that, it managed a 0 to 60 time of 5.8 seconds. Whereas with the mass volume 2.5 liter, you can expect something around 9. And that naturally aspirated engine is the only one available for base and premium trims. I did a full powertrain comparison in 0 to 60 test already if you want to check that out. But both of these are happy to run on regular fuel and get pretty good gas mileage, although some people have reported less than EPA ratings with the turbo. And the thing is, and this may shock you because I'm a car reviewer, I am glad that Subaru still offers that 2.5 liter engine because it allows, one, the car to be a little bit cheaper, and it gets great gas mileage. And honestly, a lot of people buying Outbacks don't care about speed. Some do, some definitely do. But a lot of people see it as spending an extra $2,500 for little or no reason. My last reason, and some of you aren't going to agree, is running costs, considering both reliability and resale. The 2.5 liter FB engine has been around for quite some time at this point. The FA 2.4 liter turbo, not so much. Ever since Subaru really fixed the excessive oil consumption issue, which was caused by the piston rings, the engine has been pretty reliable, and head gaskets really haven't been an issue since 2008. Some cases lingered on past then, but they had a change in head gasket material. They switched from open decks to semi-closed decks. The open deck design led to cylinder walls that weren't properly supported, and the vibrations added stress to the head gasket. Semi-open decks add more rigidity. Ultimately, time will tell, but the issues have dropped off significantly. And that piston ring oil consumption problem was something Honda, Toyota, VW, and others suffered too, and has been fixed since 2015, 2016. The only engine problems that somewhat stuck around were more minor oil leaks. Also, transmissions really haven't been an issue since the earlier part of the last generation. The biggest problems with these have been related to the infotainment systems, windshields cracking, which is expensive to replace because you have to recalibrate those safety systems, and batteries dying. While more prevalent in the last generation, some owners of current gens still report a parasitic draw. Overall though, these are more minor problems. The most major concern to me was the Ascent having reliability issues, and the Outback shares the 2.4 liter turbo with that car, but really there just aren't a bunch of reports of failures outside of a recall early on for the Outback 2.4 turbo. But that recall was mainly after failures in the Ascent, and it was related to the transmission with the XT models, not the engine. You can still choose. If you want a less complex engine under less stress, go with the 2.5 liter. And either way, it has strong resale value, which again contributes to the low running costs along with the good gas mileage, obviously. But resale could become especially important when prices of used cars eventually go back down in maybe a couple of years. But really, the Subaru Outback should be pretty cheap to own. And as usual with these videos, I could go on for a long time about the pros to this thing. It's a very well-rounded car. The biggest reasons to not consider one is really just if you want a more enthusiastic SUV, you want something that's more high-tech. or you just turned off to the whole wagon vibes, which I understand. These also carry with it various stereotypes, but I wouldn't let that stand in your way. If you can get past how a few insecure bros may look at you, the Outback is a chill car with luxurious comfort and a ton of capability. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and help me with my ongoing battle against the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you want to see more. I'll catch you in the next one.